Commander Zethkar had seen war before, across 7 different star systems, through countless battles that painted the void with fire and blood. He thought he understood the nature of conflict. The hegemony had conquered species after species with methodical precision. Each race fell into predictable patterns during warfare. The Velthari fought with honor but lacked adaptability. The Krexans used overwhelming numbers but poor tactics. The Zilith relied on technology but couldn't think beyond their programming. Standing on the bridge of the dreadnought inevitability, Zethkar watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Another conquest was beginning. This time, the target was a species that called themselves humans. Intelligence reports painted them as unremarkable. They had recently achieved faster-than-light travel, barely qualifying as a spacefaring civilization. Their technology was primitive, their ships small and poorly armed. According to hegemony assessments, they should surrender within days of the first engagement. Initial probe fleets report contact with human vessels near their outer colonies, reported Subcommander Velth. Her scaled fingers danced across the holographic controls. Early resistance is minimal, as expected. Zethkar nodded, his forearms clasped behind his back. Through the massive viewport, he could see the hegemony fleet spreading out in perfect formation, 200 warships, each one capable of reducing a planet to ash. The humans had nothing that could match even their smallest corvette. The first battle reports confirmed his expectations. Human ships were indeed primitive. Their weapons barely scratched hegemony armor. Their tactics were straightforward, almost textbook in their simplicity. They formed defensive lines, traded shots with superior forces, and retreated when overwhelmed. Some ships fought to destruction rather than surrender, but that was common among younger species. They hadn't yet learned the futility of resistance. "Sir," receiving communication from the human fleet commander, the communications officer announced. "They're requesting a meeting to discuss terms." "How predictable," Zethkar mused. "Put them through." The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing a human male in a dark uniform. The creature looked remarkably similar to the hegemony's own species, though smaller and with only 2 arms. Its face was weathered, with lines that spoke of age and experience. Most interesting were its eyes. They held intelligence, but also something else. Something that made Zethkar pause. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," the human said. The translator rendered her words in perfect hegemony standard. "I assume you're here to demand our surrender." "Your assumption is correct, Admiral Chen. I am Commander Zethkar, of the Hegemony Third Fleet. Your species has been selected for integration into our empire. Surrender now, and your people will be treated according to hegemony accords for conquered populations." Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, there was something in her voice that Zethkar couldn't identify. "Commander, I need you to understand something. What you've seen so far, that's not us fighting. That's us being polite." The transmission ended. Zethkar stared at the empty holographic space for several seconds. Around him, the bridge crew continued their duties, but he could feel a shift in the atmosphere. Something about the human's words had been unsettling. Not threatening exactly, but significant. "Continue the advance," he ordered. "All ships maintain formation. We proceed as planned." Over the next 3 days, the pattern continued. Human forces retreated from system after system, fighting delaying actions but never committing to major engagements. Their ships were fast and maneuverable, but still technologically inferior. They used clever tactics occasionally, ambushing supply convoys or striking at isolated vessels, but nothing that suggested they posed any real threat to the hegemony advance. Zethkar found himself studying the tactical reports with growing curiosity. The humans were consistent in their approach. They would engage long enough to gather data, then withdraw before taking serious losses. It was almost as if they were studying the hegemony forces, learning their capabilities and limitations. "Sir, we've reached the outer edge of their home system," Subcommander Velth reported. "Sol, according to their designation. 9 planets, 1 inhabited world called Earth. Population approximately 8 billion. Any sign of their main fleet?" "Negative, sir. Long-range sensors detect only civilian traffic and orbital platforms. It appears their military forces are elsewhere." Zethkar frowned. This was unusual. Most species made their final stand defending their homeworld. Where were the humans? The answer came 12 hours later. Commander, emergency transmission from the 5th Supply Fleet. The communications officer called out urgently. They're under attack. The tactical display updated, showing the positions of hegemony forces throughout the local sector. The 5th Supply Fleet had been following standard protocol, maintaining position 3 systems away to ensure secure supply lines. Now, red indicators showed ships going dark one by one. Show me the battle feed, Zethkar commanded. The main viewer switched to a grainy transmission from one of the supply ships. In the darkness of space, explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. But these weren't the clean energy discharges typical of space combat. These were different. Chaotic, violent in a way that seemed almost personal. Through the static, Zethkar could make out human ships moving through the hegemony formation. But they weren't fighting like they had before. Gone were the orderly formations and predictable tactics. Instead, they moved like predators, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before retaliation could be organized. One human vessel, badly damaged and venting atmosphere, rammed directly into a hegemony cruiser. Both ships disappeared in a ball of fire that seemed to burn longer than physics should have allowed. Sir, Velth said quietly, the 5th Fleet is gone. All 57 ships. The bridge fell silent. 57 ships destroyed in less than an hour. By a human force that should have been inferior in every way. How many human ships participated in the attack? Sensor data suggests 12, sir. 12 ships had destroyed 57. Zethkar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare. Uncertainty. Sir, receiving another transmission from Admiral Chen, the communications officer reported. Put her through. The human appeared again on the holographic display. This time, she looked different. The politeness was gone, replaced by something harder. Something that made Zethkar's skin crawl despite himself. Commander Zethkar, she said, I tried to warn you. What you've been fighting so far were our peacekeepers, our explorers, our diplomats with guns. You wanted to see our military? Congratulations, now you have their attention. Your threats don't impress me, Admiral. We've destroyed countless species more advanced than yours. Admiral Chen smiled, and Zethkar realized he had never seen a truly predatory expression before this moment. Commander, do you know what makes humans different from every other species you've encountered? Enlighten me. We're not just one species. We never have been. For thousands of years, we've been trying to kill each other. We've gotten very, very good at it. The only reason we stopped is because we ran out of enemies. Until now. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar staring at empty space once again. Reports began flooding in from across the sector. Human forces were appearing everywhere, hitting supply lines, communication relays, isolated patrol groups. But these weren't the same humans they had been fighting. These moved differently, thought differently, fought differently. A frigate captain reported being boarded by humans who somehow moved through bulkheads as if they weren't there. A supply depot was destroyed by a single human fighter that managed to overload the station's reactor, using methods that violated several laws of physics. Most disturbing were the reports of human ships that had been destroyed, only to explode again minutes later, taking nearby hegemony vessels with them. As if dying once wasn't enough for them. Sir, the tactical officer called out. We're receiving distress calls from the 7th Battle Group. They're engaged with human forces near the asteroid fields of Proxima. Show me. The display updated to show the engagement. Zethkar watched as human ships dove through asteroid fields at speeds that should have been suicidal, using the rocks as cover and weapons. One human destroyer grabbed an asteroid with what appeared to be magnetic clamps and hurled it at a hegemony cruiser. The impact cracked the ship's hull open like an egg. Another human vessel was completely surrounded by hegemony fighters. Instead of trying to escape, it activated what appeared to be a self-destruct mechanism, but instead of simply exploding, it created a chain reaction that turned every piece of debris into high-velocity shrapnel. The surrounding fighters were torn apart. Commander, Velth said quietly, we're losing ships faster than we're destroying them. At this rate, she didn't need to finish. Zethkar could see the tactical situation deteriorating in real time. The hegemony had superior numbers and technology, but the humans seemed to be operating by different rules entirely. Sir, incoming transmission on all frequencies, the communications officer reported. It's Admiral Chen again. But she's not addressing us specifically. Put it through. This time, Admiral Chen wasn't looking at them. She was looking past them, as if addressing someone else entirely. When she spoke, her voice carried across every hegemony communication channel simultaneously. Attention all hegemony forces. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You came to our home demanding surrender. You attacked our colonies, destroyed our ships, and killed our people. You thought war was something you understood. She paused, and when she continued, there was something in her voice that made Zethkar's blood run cold. You haven't seen war yet. What we've shown you so far is barely a warm-up. You want to see what humans do when we stop playing by civilized rules, when we stop pretending to be something we're not? Fine. Consider this your formal notification. The transmission cut to black. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of ship systems. Then every alarm on the ship began screaming at once. Sir, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. The sensor operator shouted over the noise. Directly above us, below us, all around us, the tactical display exploded with new contacts. Hundreds of human ships, appearing from nowhere in perfect coordination. But these weren't the small, primitive vessels they had been fighting. These were massive, bristling with weapons that registered as completely unknown to hegemony sensors. How did they get so close without being detected? Zethkar demanded. Unknown, sir. It's as if they just appeared. One of the new human ships, easily the size of a hegemony battlecruiser, turned toward the inevitability. Across its hull, in letters large enough to read from space, was painted a single word: revenge. Zethkar realized, with growing horror, that everything they had encountered so far had been humans holding back. Humans being restrained. Humans trying to minimize conflict. Now they were about to see what humans were like when they stopped trying to be civilized. The war was about to begin in earnest, and Commander Zethkar, veteran of 7 campaigns, conqueror of a dozen species, suddenly understood that he had no idea what war actually looked like. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically to coordinate a response, but Zethkar could see it in their movements, hear it in their voices. They were afraid. For the first time since joining the hegemony military, they were truly afraid. The humans had tried to warn them. Admiral Chen had told them directly that what they'd seen wasn't humans fighting. It was humans being polite. Now, surrounded by ships bearing names like Payback, and Remember Proxima, and Never Again, Zethkar finally understood the difference, and he began to realize that the hegemony might have made a terrible, terrible mistake. The human fleet didn't attack immediately. They surrounded the hegemony forces in a perfect sphere, hundreds of massive warships maintaining exact distances from each other and their targets. The precision was unsettling. Everything about these new vessels screamed military efficiency, but it was efficiency of a type Zethkar had never encountered. Sir, they're not responding to any communication attempts, the communications officer reported. They're just waiting. Zethkar studied the tactical display. Each human ship was positioned with mathematical precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that would make any escape attempt suicidal. But more disturbing was what the sensors were telling him about these vessels. They were massive, yes, but they also registered as being incredibly dense. As if every cubic meter was packed with weapons, armor, and systems he couldn't identify. Analysis of the new human ships? He asked. Sir, our sensors are having difficulty penetrating their hulls. The science officer replied nervously. What we can detect suggests armor thickness exceeding our heaviest battleships. Weapons signatures are unusual. Many of them don't match any known energy patterns. Unknown energy patterns? Some appear to be kinetic-based, but accelerated to velocities that should be impossible. Others are generating readings that suggest they manipulate matter at the atomic level. And sir, some of them appear to be biological. Biological weapons? No, sir. Biological ships. Parts of these vessels are reading as living tissue. Before Zethkar could process this information fully, every human ship simultaneously broadcast the same message, not to the hegemony forces, but to each other. It was a single word in the human language, transmitted on all frequencies: unleash. What happened next redefined Zethkar's understanding of space combat. The human ships didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, They released swarms of objects that moved like living creatures through space. These weren't missiles or drones. They were something else entirely. They swarmed toward hegemony vessels, changing direction in ways that defied physics, accelerating and decelerating without visible propulsion systems. The first contact came when these swarms reached the outer picket ships. Instead of exploding on impact, they began eating through the hull plating, literally consuming the metal and converting it into more of themselves. Within minutes, entire ships were being devoured from the outside in. Sir, the destroyer Vengeance reports their hull is being consumed by some kind of nanological weapon, Velth reported, her voice tight with disbelief. They're requesting immediate support. Send fighter squadrons to assist. But when the hegemony fighters engaged the swarms, something worse happened. The organic weapons adapted. Mid-flight, they changed shape and behavior, developing countermeasures against the fighters' weapons in real time. Some formed into larger creatures that swallowed fighters whole. Others created electromagnetic fields that disabled ship systems completely. Sir, the fighters aren't having any effect. The enemy weapons are. Learning. This was impossible. Weapons didn't learn. Technology followed predictable patterns. But these swarms were behaving like living creatures with intelligence and adaptation capabilities. Then the human ships themselves began to move. They didn't accelerate gradually like normal vessels. They simply went from stationary to incredible velocity instantly, as if the laws of inertia didn't apply to them. Hegemony sensors couldn't track their movement properly. One moment they were in one position, the next, they were somewhere else entirely. One human ship, bearing the name Righteous Fury, suddenly appeared directly above the hegemony battleship Dominator. But instead of firing weapons, it did something that violated every principle of space combat Zethkar knew. It grabbed the battleship, massive appendages, organic in nature, extended from the human vessel, and wrapped around the hegemony ship like tentacles. Then it began to squeeze. The Dominator, a vessel designed to withstand direct hits from plasma cannons, crumpled like paper in the grip of something that shouldn't have been able to exist. What in the seven hells are those ships made of? Zethkar whispered. His answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Chen's voice appeared on a direct channel, bypassing all communication protocols. You want to know what they're made of, Commander? Hate. Pure, concentrated human hatred. Every ship in this fleet was grown, not built, grown from the genetic material of colonists you killed in your first attacks. They're literally powered by our desire for revenge. That's impossible. Living ships can't survive the vacuum of space. Commander, you really don't understand what you're fighting, do you? These aren't ships with crews, these are the crews. Every one of these vessels is inhabited by the consciousness of someone you killed. They're not just fighting to win. They're fighting because they're already dead, and death made them angry. The transmission cut out, leaving Zethkar staring at the tactical display in horror. The human fleet wasn't just using advanced technology. They were using the dead as weapons. Around him, more reports flooded in. Human boarding parties were somehow materializing inside hegemony ships without using shuttles or transport beams. They simply appeared in corridor and began systematically hunting down crew members. But these boarders moved in ways that suggested they weren't entirely physical beings. Sir, the cruiser, Inevitable, reports their crew is being hunted by humans who can walk through walls, the communications officer reported. The boarding parties appear to be translucent ghosts. The humans were using the souls of their dead as assault troops, but the true horror was yet to come. The largest human ship in the fleet, a massive vessel that registered as being several kilometers long, began to change shape. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, reforming itself into something that looked disturbingly organic. Weapon ports opened that weren't there before. Systems came online that hadn't existed moments earlier. Sir, that ship is growing, the science officer reported in a shaking voice. It's adding mass and capability in real time. How is that possible? I don't think it's possible, sir. I think it's just happening anyway. The massive ship, if it could still be called a ship, turned toward the inevitability. Across its ever-changing hull, words appeared in glowing letters. Remember, Terra Nova. Terra Nova had been one of the first human colonies to fall to the hegemony assault. Zethkar remembered the reports. The population had refused to surrender. So the hegemony had bombarded the planet from orbit until nothing remained but molten rock. Sir, energy readings from that vessel are off all scales, the tactical officer reported. Whatever it's preparing to fire, our shields won't stop it. Evasive maneuvers, all ships, scatter formation. But before the hegemony fleet could react, the massive human ship fired. Not energy beams or missiles, but something that looked like concentrated starlight. The beam struck the battleship Conqueror and simply erased it from existence. Not destroyed, not vaporized, erased. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, leaving not even debris behind. What kind of weapon can do that? Velth asked in horror. The answer came from Admiral Chen again, her voice now carrying across all hegemony frequencies simultaneously. That's what we call a memory weapon, Commander. It doesn't just destroy the target, it removes all evidence that the target ever existed. The crew of Terra Nova designed it before they died. They wanted to make sure that when humans got revenge, it would be absolute. More human ships began firing memory weapons. Each shot erased another hegemony vessel completely. But worse than the destruction was the psychological effect. Crew members began to forget ships that had been destroyed, as if they had never existed. Battle formations collapsed as commanders lost track of vessels that were no longer there. Sir, we need to retreat, Velth urged. These weapons are beyond our capability to counter. But retreat wasn't possible. The human fleet had positioned itself in a perfect sphere around the hegemony forces. Every direction led toward human ships that defied conventional understanding of warfare. Then something even more impossible happened. The destroyed hegemony ships began to reappear. But they weren't under hegemony control anymore. They moved with the fluid grace of the human vessels, their hulls bearing new names like Sweet Revenge and Paid in Blood. They're not just destroying our ships, Zethkar realized with growing horror. They're converting them. The converted hegemony vessels turned their weapons on their former fleetmates. But these weren't the weapons they had carried before. They had been modified, enhanced, made more terrible. Plasma cannons that had once fired clean energy beams now spat something that looked like liquid hatred. Sir, the converted ships are broadcasting on hegemony frequencies, the communications officer reported. The voices. They're speaking our language, but they're human voices. They're taunting us. One of the converted destroyers, originally the Swift Strike, opened a channel. The voice that came through was human, but speaking perfect hegemony standard, with an accent that suggested native fluency. Hello, former friends. This is Captain Morrison of Terra Nova Colony. You killed my family, my children, my wife. Thank you for giving me this ship. I'm going to use it to return the favor. The Swift Strike, now renamed Terra's Revenge, began hunting its former fleetmates with an intimacy that was terrifying. It knew exactly where to hit each ship for maximum damage. It knew their weaknesses, their blind spots, their emergency procedures. Because it had been one of them. How do the humans know our ship designs so well? Zethkar demanded. The answer came from studying the sensor readings more carefully. The human ships weren't just using advanced technology. They were using hegemony technology, enhanced, modified, and improved beyond recognition, but fundamentally based on captured hegemony systems. Sir, analysis suggests the humans have been studying our technology for months. Every ship they captured, every engagement they fought, they were learning, adapting. They've taken our own weapons and made them better. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the realization that the humans had been planning this from the beginning. Every retreat, every seemingly desperate defensive action, had been carefully calculated to make the hegemony overconfident, while the humans prepared their true response. Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Chen. She's requesting a direct communication link. Put her through. Admiral Chen appeared again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood figures that Zethkar recognized as the commanders of ships that had been destroyed in earlier engagements. They were translucent, ghostly, but unmistakably present. Commander Zethkar, Admiral Chen said, I want you to meet some friends of mine. This is Captain Rodriguez, of the Proxima Defense Fleet. This is Commander Singh, from the Mars Orbital Station. This is Colonel Washington from Terra Nova. They all have something in common. You killed them. The ghostly figures stepped forward, and when they spoke, their voices carried across every communication channel in the hegemony fleet. We want our revenge, they said in unison, and death won't stop us from taking it. Zethkar realized with absolute certainty that the hegemony had not just picked a fight with humanity, They had picked a fight with every human who had ever lived and died, and somehow, impossibly, the humans had found a way to bring their dead back as weapons of war. The battle wasn't just a military engagement anymore. It was a war between the living and the dead, with the dead being led by the living, in a campaign of supernatural vengeance that defied every law of nature. Zethkar understood, and the dead, it appeared, were very, very angry. Around him, the bridge crew worked desperately to find some way to fight back against enemies that shouldn't have been able to exist. But Zethkar could see the truth in their eyes. They were no longer fighting a war they could win. They were fighting a war they couldn't even understand. The humans had been right. They hadn't seen war yet. Now they were seeing something far worse. They were seeing what happened when humans stopped pretending to be bound by the laws that governed normal warfare and started making their own rules. And the first rule of human warfare, Zethkar was beginning to understand, was that death was just the beginning. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, but time seemed to have lost all meaning. Zethkar watched his fleet being systematically dismantled by forces that operated beyond conventional understanding. The hegemony had lost 60% of their vessels, but the human fleet had somehow grown larger during the engagement. Every destroyed hegemony ship was converted and added to their ranks within minutes. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Hegemony Command," the communications officer announced. "They're ordering immediate withdrawal to Rally Point 7. Relay the order to all remaining ships. We're pulling back." But even as he gave the command, Zethkar knew it was futile. The human fleet moved to intercept every escape vector simultaneously. Ships that tried to jump to hyperspace found their engines disabled by weapons that targeted technology rather than destroying it. Others discovered their navigation systems had been subtly reprogrammed to lead them in circles. "Sir, the humans aren't trying to destroy our retreating ships," Velth observed. "They're hurting them." She was right. The human fleet was directing the fleeing hegemony vessels toward a specific region of space, like predators driving prey into a trap. Zethkar checked the stellar charts and felt his blood freeze. They were being forced toward the outer edge of the solar system, where long-range sensors had detected something massive waiting in the darkness. "What's out there?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. It's too far away to scan properly, but it's enormous, possibly larger than our entire fleet combined." The answer came as they drew closer. What waited for them in the depths of space was not a ship. It was a structure, a massive installation that had been constructed in secret while the hegemony fleet had been engaging what they thought was the human military. The structure was clearly artificial, but it moved like a living thing, its surfaces flowing and reshaping themselves as they watched. "Sir, that installation. It's built from wreckage," the science officer reported in horror. "Hegemony wreckage. It appears to be constructed entirely from the remains of ships destroyed during our campaign." Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge again, but this time it seemed to come from the structure itself rather than any ship. "Commander Zethkar, allow me to introduce you to the necropolis. Every piece of hegemony metal that we've collected, every component from every ship you've lost, we've brought it here. But we didn't just pile it together. We made something new, something that remembers every life you took." The necropolis began to unfold like a mechanical flower. Weapon ports opened that were the size of city blocks. Launch bays emerged that could house entire fleets, and from its surface, a new type of vessel began to emerge. These weren't ships at all. They were manifestations of pure human will given physical form. "Those aren't constructed vessels," the science officer whispered. "They're appearing out of nothing, as if they're being willed into existence." "How is that possible?" "I don't know, sir. But energy readings suggest they're drawing power from the quantum foam itself. They're literally converting empty space into weapons." The newly manifested vessels moved toward the trapped hegemony fleet, with purposeful intent. Each one bore names that spoke of loss and vengeance. Orphaned children, widowed mothers, broken promises, stolen futures. But the most terrifying aspect was their crews. Through the transparent sections of their hulls, Zethkar could see the operators inside. They weren't solid beings. They were composed of light and memory, the spiritual essence of every human who had died in the conflict. They moved with fluid grace, operating controls that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Sir, those aren't living beings operating those ships," Velth said in a voice barely above a whisper. "They're concepts, abstract ideas given form and purpose. One of the concept ships approached the inevitability directly. Through its translucent hull, Zethkar could see its operator, a being of pure light that somehow conveyed infinite sadness and infinite rage simultaneously. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from inside Zethkar's own mind. I am the manifestation of every life you cut short, every dream you destroyed, every future you stole. I am here for justice. What do you want? Zethkar asked, though he wasn't sure if he spoke aloud or simply thought the words. We want you to understand, to truly comprehend what you have done, not just the deaths you caused, but the ripple effects. The children who will never be born, the discoveries that will never be made, the love that will never be shared. We want you to feel the weight of infinite possibility crushed beneath your actions. Suddenly, Zethkar's mind was flooded with visions. He saw the human colonies as they had been before the hegemony attack. Families sharing meals, children playing in gardens under alien suns, scientists making discoveries that could have benefited the entire galaxy, artists creating beauty that transcended species boundaries. Then he saw those same colonies burning, families torn apart by hegemony weapons, children crying for parents who would never come home, all of it destroyed for the sake of expanding hegemony control. But the visions didn't stop there. They showed him what could have been. The human children, who would have grown up to become peacemakers between species, the scientists who would have solved galactic hunger and disease, the artists whose work would have brought joy to countless worlds, all of it snuffed out by hegemony aggression. Now you begin to understand, the entity said. You didn't just kill people, you killed the future itself. Around the trapped hegemony fleet, more concept ships appeared. Each one represented a different aspect of human loss. Broken trust, disabled communication systems with weapons that made deception impossible. Shattered hope caused ship systems to malfunction by confronting them with the meaninglessness of their actions. Infinite grief simply absorbed other vessels into itself, converting them into extensions of human sorrow. Sir, our weapons are completely ineffective, the tactical officer reported. Every shot we fire is being absorbed and redirected back at us. But the energy signatures suggest it's not just being reflected. It's being transformed into something that causes psychological damage to our crews. Zethkar could see the truth of this in the behavior of his bridge crew. Normally disciplined officers were breaking down into tears as they were forced to confront the emotional weight of their actions. Engineering reports spoke of crew members simply laying down their tools and refusing to continue fighting against forces that represented pure moral certainty. Admiral Chen, Zethkar transmitted on open frequencies. What is it you want from us? Surrender? Destruction? What will end this? The response came not from Admiral Chen, but from the collective voices of every human consciousness in the surrounding fleet. We want you to remember, they said in unison. We want you to carry the memory of this moment for the rest of your species' existence. We want you to understand that some things should not be disturbed, that some species should be left alone, that sometimes the cost of conquest is higher than any possible gain. The necropolis began to emit a new type of energy, not destructive, but invasive. It penetrated every hegemony ship, every computer system, every communication network. But instead of causing damage, it was uploading information, memories, experiences, the complete record of human civilization from its beginning to the present moment. Sir, they're downloading our entire database, the computer technician reported. But they're also uploading something massive, terabytes of data that our systems can't even categorize. What kind of data? It appears to be cultural information, art, literature, music, philosophy, scientific theories, personal memories. They're giving us their entire civilization. Zethkar realized with growing amazement that the humans weren't trying to destroy hegemony knowledge. They were sharing their own, forcing the hegemony to understand exactly what they had tried to erase. Why? He asked. Why show us this instead of simply destroying us? Admiral Chen's image appeared one final time. But now she was surrounded by thousands of other humans, the living and the dead, standing together in impossible harmony. Because destruction would make us like you, she said simply, and we refuse to become the thing we're fighting against. Instead, we're going to make sure you never forget what you almost lost. Every hegemony citizen will carry these memories. Every child born in your empire will know the beauty of what you tried to destroy. It will haunt you. change you, make you better. The upload continued for hours. Hegemony computers strained under the weight of human experience, but somehow managed to contain it all. Art that moved the soul. Music that spoke of universal truths. Literature that explored the depths of sentient experience. Scientific theories that promised solutions to galactic problems. And through it all, personal memories. A human child taking first steps. Two lovers sharing a sunset on a distant world. A grandmother telling stories to wide-eyed grandchildren. Simple moments of beauty and joy that gave meaning to existence. Sir, Velth said quietly, tears streaming down her scaled face, this is what we tried to destroy. This is what we thought was primitive and worthless. Around them, the hegemony fleet hung motionless in space. Not because their ships were disabled, but because their crews were overwhelmed by the sudden understanding of what they had participated in. Hardened warriors wept as they experienced human love for the first time. Tactical officers stared in wonder at human art that spoke to emotions they had never known they possessed. The human fleet began to withdraw, but not in retreat, in forgiveness. As each vessel departed, it transmitted a final message. Remember us not as enemies, but as what you could become. The necropolis was the last to leave. As it folded itself back into space, Admiral Chen appeared one final time. Commander Zethkar, your war is over. Not because we destroyed you, but because we've given you something more powerful than any weapon. We've given you perspective. Use it wisely. The transmission ended, and the hegemony fleet found itself alone in empty space. Alone with the weight of infinite human experience flowing through their consciousness. Alone with the knowledge of what they had almost destroyed forever. Zethkar sat in his command chair, no longer a conqueror but something else entirely. A witness. A keeper of memories that would reshape his entire civilization. Around him, his crew worked quietly, each one forever changed by contact with the deepest essence of humanity. Sir, Velth asked eventually, what are your orders? Zethkar thought for a long moment. He could feel the human memories flowing through his mind. Their laughter, their tears, their hopes, their dreams. He understood now why they had fought so desperately, and why they had chosen mercy over vengeance. Set course for Hegemony Central Command, he said finally. We have a report to make. And recommendations. Many recommendations. What kind of recommendations, sir? That we never, ever, make the mistake of underestimating humanity again. And that, maybe, just maybe, it's time the hegemony learned a different way to interact with other species. As the surviving ships of the hegemony fleet began their long journey home, they carried with them something more valuable than any conquest. The memory of a species that had shown them what it meant to be truly civilized. The war was over. But for the hegemony, the real education was just beginning. In the depths of space, where the battle had taken place, energy signatures still lingered. Not from weapons or explosions, but from something far more powerful. The echo of human determination, human creativity, human love, and somewhere in those echoes, Admiral Chen's final words repeated endlessly. Remember us not as enemies, but as what you could become. And quote, the hegemony would remember. They had no choice now, and in remembering, they would discover that the humans had given them the greatest gift possible. The chance to evolve beyond their nature as conquerors and become something better, something more human.